Hello, welcome to my channel and my worldbuilding project, Perils of the Ravaged Gardens. This episode will be all about daggers and knives. When designing the different factions of my world, I want all three of them to look and feel distinct in as much detail as I can manage, which of course includes their personal tools. Back in March 2024 I made this little dagger. It's an older traditional Maraki'an design that is very widespread, but is now mostly used by rural commoners. I was initially inspired by a very pretty Magic the Gathering card. This is the art for the card Disenchant from the 1995 Ice Age set, illustrated by Brian Snoddy. I soon discovered that Mr. Snoddy had taken some inspiration himself from the Ultuna sword, a Swedish archaeological find from the 7th century. It also bears some similarities in its construction to the famous Sutton Hoo sword from the same time period. Anyways, inspired by this I made this much simpler little Maraki'an dagger. It's not very spectacular, but it was fun to make. I didn't know if this was enough to make a video about, however, so the footage was left to rot. Fast forward to current times, and I had a sudden urge to draw a couple of daggers. I ended up drawing a total of 27 knives or daggers, 9 for each faction. While I'm making the real little dagger in the background, let's go through them and I'll tell you of their design, purpose and where I took the inspiration. We start with the classic dagger of the Emnic Knight. I love this design, and give it to almost everyone I draw. This is actually inspired by another real dagger I made, one of my favorite objects I own. It took me a long time to finish this. I think I may have drawn a sketch of it in 2018, started making it in 2019 and finished it in 2022. I don't remember any direct source of inspiration for this one. The cross unfortunately takes it out of the Ravaged Gardens world. The project didn't exist back then. Otherwise I may have gone for a serpent or some other Emnic crest instead. A knight fighting another knight will want a rondel dagger, which has a sturdy blade and a big round butt to push hard on, in order to pierce the chainmail in the weak points of the opponent's armor. Real world knights use them, and so do Emnic knights. The next dagger might look a bit silly if you're not familiar with them, but they were actually real and very popular for a long time. It's called a bollock dagger, and they were used by pretty much everyone. The same goes for the good people of the Emnic Concord. The bollock dagger is such a classic weapon for the medieval knight, it had to get a home in my worldbuilding project, which I think quite comfortably classifies as knight punk or knightcore or something like that. It's also pretty funny. This version is simple and would belong to a commoner. Next up is another option for the Emnic knight, though a bit fancier. This blade shape is taken from a real-world Flamberg sword. In world, the shape comes from the Ronmari people, and the style is called Rochecollet, or a viper tongue pattern. Their king, Eirosh, has a sword in this style, and one of their most powerful blood magic knightesses, the cast iron snake Shirei, wields a great serpent with a viper tongue blade. The Ronmari did not have access to a lot of steel before their arrival on Morn, so a lot of their old weapons were cast from bronze, as can be seen here. The handle on this dagger is reminiscent of a medieval basilard. It's decorated with a sheep's head. The Ronmari brought sheep to Morn and are very proud of them, so sheep designs are often incorporated in their art. The next dagger is an old style, a traditional farm worker's dagger. It's big enough to pass as a sword. It's used to cut down bushes, weeds and brushwood, and for some woodcrafts or slaughtering animals. I've touched on the design before. One hangs from the belt of this farmer. This is a knight's hunting dagger. This one has a smaller crossguard as it's not mainly intended as a weapon. Close to the blade it is single-edged, so it's easier to use this part of the blade for smaller tasks like wood carving. Further down the blade a second edge starts, which gives it a sharper point and makes it more suitable for bleeding an animal. This edge configuration leaves some room for an engraving on the blade. Maybe the most specialized of this lot. It's a parrying dagger made specifically to be used in the offhand in the combination with a sword. More often carried in the city, here it replaces the shield, which is usually worn in the field. Because of the differences in fighting technique as compared to the sword and shield combination, they are most often worn by specially trained fencers, or by people who try to impress others with a fancy new dagger. The last dagger of this lot is that of an Emnic priest. As such, it's intended to be used in rituals and doesn't need a crossguard at all. The handle is made from bone and carved to resemble Emno, God, or one interpretation of him at least. Changing from city to city, he is sometimes depicted with or without horns, wings, a long mane of hair, and other various attributes. Okay, and welcome to the DVD bonus feature knife making commentary track. Let's get started. I'm not a very skilled smith, so my work at the forge only got me this far. And if you're not good at blacksmithing, you better be good at grinding. Some work with an angle grinder and a belt sander got me to this point. Then it was time to start on the handle. For the guard I'm using brass. Brass, bronze, copper and gold are colors that the Maraki use a lot in their designs. I drill these holes really off center, which is fine because I'm gonna need to file the hole for the blade a lot bigger anyways. It's just embarrassing in hindsight. But I did get the fit pretty decent. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. For the wood parts on this dagger I'm using oak, which is a luxury material for me. But I'm not sure what the Maraki would use. I guess we have to save that for the arborist episode, or the flora of the Kermesse Mountains. I sought out the rough shape of the handle of my bandsaw, and off camera it caught on the blade and got sucked into this big hole and ruined. But no big deal, just have to make another one. I also had to make a new little lid for the hole out of plywood. I did split the handle in two and used a chisel to get a good fit for the tang of the knife, which kind of feels like cheating, but it doesn't negatively affect the strength of the handle in any way. Next I'm making a leather wrap for the handle. This just looks so good. I cut out a couple of really thin strips of leather and glued them in place on the handle with super glue. I got this very nice piece of reddish brown leather in a trade with a friend called Flipgun many years ago. Back then it was intended to be used for slingshot pouches, but as you can see my interests have shifted a bit since then. I soaked it in water so it would conform to the handle and glued it in place using wood glue. And then I wrapped it with some very strong linen thread in order to get a really tight fit around the handle. And I left it overnight to dry. Knife 1 and 2 from the Agir lot are variations of the same type of knife. That which is part of a belt kit, also containing other useful gear. I mentioned it in the Agir career video. This knife is an all-round tool that the Agir use for pretty much anything. They are given to young Agir as they pass into adulthood. They hold some spiritual influence too, owing to an old Agir folktale. The snake god Yelevid was crawling through the forest when they were caught in a sudden rainstorm. They looked for shelter, but could only find the den of Yemeril, the wolf god. The snake knew the wolf harbored no warm feelings for them, so in order to be let in, they disguised themselves as a ferocious she-wolf. Well inside the den, the wolf god was smitten by them and mated with the snake. Soon, Yelevid gave birth to a wicked creature, the worm wolf. Dark fur covered its writhing body. It had the boldness of the wolf, the slyness of the snake, and claws and fangs as long as sharp as any others. When the wolf god beheld this creature, they became furious and chased the wormwolf and the snake from its den. Sometime later, the wormwolf slithered by the spring lake when it heard a strange cry. In a woven cradle, it found the first Agir child sleeping. The hungry wormwolf opened its wide jaws and swallowed them, cradle and all. But it so happened that Yemeril, the wolf god, had seen that the child had no fangs of its own, so it had placed in its cradle a knife. The child took the knife, cut a hole in the creature's mouth, and escaped. The wormwolf fled, crying and bleeding. And since that day, the wormwolf could no longer hunt for itself. It's fed by the wormhounds, its offspring, who hunts for them. But to this day, they all fear and stay well away from the smell of sharpened iron. For these kits I took heavy inspiration from the Mongolian Celt. There are many clans of Agir with differing cultural aesthetic preferences, so these can vary quite a bit. I think a lot of my designs, be it objects, animals or people, can be a bit too normal or boring, and I'm trying to improve that, in one way by taking inspiration from a wider selection of places. The online archive of the Met Museum, which I have praised in the past, has a ton of photos of knives and daggers from all over the world, and most are in the public domain, so I can show them to you here. This is an Agir flaying knife, which is a pretty direct copy of this beautiful object that the Met labels as a Vaira flaying knife. I've drawn Agir swords before, based on the lovely Burmese Da and Thai Dab, with big round pommels and slightly flaring blades. The warriors of the Agir also carry daggers with these attributes, as is seen here. Some time ago I had the idea for a video to make a box of various Agir items of occult importance, which Agir would sell to Emnic travelers to take home and show off. The only item I actually made before scrapping the idea is this prop Agir knife, as in there's no actual knife here, just a piece of wood that also takes influence from my Japanese tanto. This chunky little tool is a belt sickle. It will be used by Agir to collect small quantities of plants in the forests or in gardens. Due to its ability to also quickly sever pouch strings, belts or coin lappets, it has also been called the sixth finger of the thief or pickpocket. Another funny looking knife is this one, which is called a snake knife. Here we experimented with a weird handle shape. Knives like these are typically used for fighting and is mostly seen in the hands of criminals, robbers and other brigands. A more practical tool is a boscage cleaver, a big knife that's used to chop through small trees and bushes. I took inspiration from an Afghan knife for the big blade and handguard, and a Sri Lankan knife for the handle shape, but also from, this is a Swedish word I couldn't find an English translation, skäktträ. These are wooden sword-like tools used to work hemp and linen. This boscage cleaver is decorated on the spine with Agir family symbols. And here is a model from another Agir clan, with a blade in what the Agir call a leaf pattern. The last little Agir knife is a small utility tool, containing small blades that are used by a scribe to carve letters into wood. It's decorated with a small bronze boar and the letter of the god of the scribes, Nephthros. Okay, the handle is dry and it's time to unravel it. This looks really nice, and the glue joint is really strong. I'm finished with the easy parts of the guard and pommel, but this weird star-like shape is a bit more difficult to get fabricated. It took a couple of tries. But eventually I got there. I then soldered the sides onto this main part. Just super professional, very precise. Beautiful, perfect. Just... It did, however, hold up to my filing and grinding, and in the end it looked pretty decent. Now we're at the point in the project where that initial burst of inspiration and energy is running out, so to help me keep focus, I made a little list of all the things we need to do to get it finished. I didn't have any rivets or brass rods long enough to actually rivet these pieces together, so instead I used the shorter rivets I had and cut them off and glued them in place. So they're fake, but it looks good. And they're not structurally important anyway. Then it was time to harden the blade. This is the part where I have the least idea of what I'm doing. But it did work, it did get hard, and it worked great until the point where I tried to straighten the hardened blade, and this happened. For the very same reason, the Emnic Knights carry rondel daggers. So does some among the Maraki. Mostly these are worn by specialist knight breakers, the Amyon Arkali, which I made a separate video about. This little knife is a brewer's utility knife. The lizard is the patron animal of the second Maraki scion, the brewer, so it often makes appearances in the decoration of their clothes and accessories. I struggle with not making this blade shape look too modern. This is my favorite dagger from the whole video, and I definitely want to make one of these for real sometime. This is a decorated arbiter's dagger. Many branches of the line of the first scion, the heir or interpreter, carry these fine blades. It's an ear dagger, named for the strangely flaring discs of the pommel. In the real world, this design came to Europe from the Moors, through Spain and Italy in the 14th century, although the shape has appeared much earlier in Persia, for example as seen here in a bronze dagger from 1100 BCE. As mentioned earlier in the video, I try and keep the design style separate for the three factions. Emnics get the classic straight sword-like daggers and medieval Europe-ish fashions, and the Agir designs use curvier lines and circles. For the Maraki, two shapes are dominant: the four-pointed star motif and this axe-like shape. I use this in helmet crests, belt buckles and tool handles, as seen here on this urban utility dagger. This is a more modern and popular version of the old rural utility dagger I'm making. Next up is another design I really liked, combining the crossguard design from the older commoner dagger style with a fancy pommel. A hunting knife worn by a rich officer from an unspecified family line, although one could guess it's from the line of the third scion, the archer. This bloodline is the home of all the professional mountain huntsmen and women. In real life, I most often see these things referred to as sword catchers or sword breakers. For my world, I use the term sword eater because it sounds so damn cool. The Renaissance era weapon fits perfectly in the Maraki arsenal, both because the Maraki love fanciful inventions like this, and because of the perceived threat that it can pose to the sword-worshipping Ammonites. This model has finger rings extending over the hand and thumb, as well as a regular crossguard, to serve its function as a parrying dagger better. This is a dagger that has a greater symbolic function rather than being used for much actual work. While it can be used for chopping herbs or incense, it's primarily an indicator of the bearer being a priestess from the line of the sixth scion, the herald. Priests and priestesses are part of every main scion branch, but those of the herald are the most numerous and those responsible for spreading the word of the prophet. In days past, priestesses used these knives in sacrificial rites, now long obsolete in Maraki culture, or in the execution of infidels, a task which is now rarely carried out by the actual priestess themselves. The broad blade features an engraving of a pair of cranes, cranes being the symbolic animal of the herald. The last knife is another priestess's knife, that of a warrior priestess. Adorned with the same karagira's head that often decorate the hilts of Maraki sabers, this weapon is meant to be used not only against the mother prophet's enemies, but for a grislier purpose as well. Ritual suicide in the event of capture, to ensure that the Maraki warrior priestess never serves another master than her mother.
Okay, as you could see, I snapped it. I am furious, but whatever. Now I got two alternative plans.
I had a lot of really bad and stupid ideas for how to salvage the broken knife, but in the end I did the right thing and just made a new blade. The sheet is made in a similar way to how I made a handle, splitting it and using a chisel to hollow it out. A bit of sloppy chisel work here as you can see, but it worked out fine. In the end I used a piece of leather to make it a tighter fit, so it worked out. Shaping the outside of the sheath was very easy on the belt sander. Speaking of belt sanders, do anyone have any recommendations for a brand that lasts more than 2 years? This is the second piece of shit garbage I've had break on me. So yeah, leave your belt sander tips in the comments. Thank you. I used a Dremel to make these shallow grooves where I will put brass wire later. For the belt clip I gave it this typical Maraki'an star motif. I really liked this detail and it was really fun to make. One of my favorite parts of this project. I used super glue to lock these wires into place in the grooves, and this has held up decently well. No, I didn't glue my skin to the sheath 4 times in a row. Why do you ask? With the sheath complete, all we need to do is color or stain all the wood parts. I used the same red wood stain I used for my Mordhammer sword. I don't know what the best way is to use this, make it last, but I've read somewhere that using acetone is good. It really dissolves the paint pigment, I think. I'm going to lock it in place with a clear coat of varnish later on anyway. But I used multiple coats and really got it in there to get a really deep color. So yeah, this is how nice it looks with some linseed oil on top. And then we'll lock it all in place with a clear varnish. This really dulls the brass parts, but it's easy to scrape it off with a little knife or something. And it's finally time for assembly. This is just like a god tier model kit, satisfaction wise. I used 2-component epoxy to keep everything in place, taking real care to not get any spills on the leather, which would be the hardest to clean up. The brass is fine, you can just scrape things off. And I pinned everything in place properly with a hammer. And this part is just glued on. It hasn't come off yet, so success. So satisfying to complete. And there we have it, the finished knife. It's okay. It's not a masterpiece. The grind and the blade is a tiny bit crooked compared to the handle. But for, you know, something that a regular Maraki'an dude would carry, it fits pretty good. And it was really nice to make. Making this video has really put me in the mood to make another knife, but we'll see when that happens. If that's something you want to see, let me know. Anyways, that's all for today. Take care. Bye.